Record. So it's going to record from my phone probably. Yeah, it's recording. It allowed me to be the host on the phone.
Nice.
So yeah, so some things you said is, you know, like, how do we explore the human experience and make it valid, you know, outside of positivist, post-positivist approaches, which we respect, um, and understand the power of those methods. But you said you'd like to dive a little more into, um, you know, and study what makes us, you know, human experience in a scholarly way,
Hmm.
um, that goes a little bit, or you know, more. Um, you know, that's both, I guess, more expansive, you know. So, and do you want to say what attracted you to this particular book? Is that's really what mostly attracted you to these particular readings?
Yeah, I mean, so this one in particular, I mean, transpersonal research methods, really looking at that, because I think from my viewpoint, again, like the kind of conventional academia, like quantitative research, positivist framework. And I mean, I knew, and I have done some qualitative research too,
Mhm.
specifically grounded theory stuff, um, which I was very interested in. And at the same time, like my experience with that is it's very reductionist, right? Because you're going from open coding to selective coding to axio coding, and you have all of this data. And I just remember looking through like 100 pages of like interviews and summarizing all of it in like literally a sentence. And I'm like, this does not, it's accurate, but it's not capturing like the breadth of experience that's here. So I think
Yes.
it's just so interesting to me.
Oh,
People have been
interesting.
doing
You
this
just
work.
said not capturing the breadth of experience, and I heard you said BREDTH. I heard
Yeah.
BREATH.
Ooh, I mean both. Maybe I mean
I'm
both.
hearing that. I'm just like sort of the living pulse, like the person, like human being.
Exactly. That's what's missing.
Let's talk about the breadth and breadth, you
The
know,
breath.
the breadth of
Say
experience.
that 15 times fast.
Breath,
Breath.
breath. Yeah, but I mean, like, and
Yeah.
also we're looking at
Say
those,
that.
all those methods, even some of these methods capture sort of group norms or themes, and that's important in terms of human experience, but not
Yeah.
that particular human or this other human. And so, um,
Exactly. So I'm just interested. I think what interested me about it so much is I've always kind of thought this and kind of tried to bring this up in a lot of like my classes and research and things. And I've always been kind of like pushed aside. And I didn't realize that there were all these other methods that were pretty scholarly as a basis. Like, again, like, I mean, I think there's a lot of value in ethnographies and first person narratives and things like that. And from my perspective and what I had known, it was either like quantitative, qualitative, that kind of version, and then ethnographies. Like there was nothing in between. So this whole world is kind of opening up. And I'm like, oh man, there's so much value in like finding these different paradigms and figuring out what works for like what exactly do I want to study. And there's all this existing scholarly
oh my
texts that are
goodness.
exploring this, and people have
There are
done it
so
for
many. And
years.
Erin, I'm just going to tell you, I just stumbled on this journal because I was looking up stuff on transdisciplinarity for this transdisciplinary
Yeah.
letter. There's a journal called, I just getting into it, Journal of Research Practice. And it's
Ooh,
so very transdisciplinary. I mean, so it
good.
doesn't use the word transdisciplinary, but oh no, it is. Oh goodness.
Really?
Yeah, Journal of Research Practice. The first word, I didn't even notice this. It's funny. The first word in there is transdisciplinary,
Yeah.
peer reviewed, open access.
I
Uh,
love that.
Journal of Research Practice, a quality conscious peer reviewed journal published online by Athabasca University in
Did
Canada.
you say that it's open access?
Open
Okay.
access. And yeah, JRP, Journal of Research
Hmm.
Practice, is connecting researchers. And it's like connecting all researchers. And they have 6 main areas of focus: research applications, research spaces, research education, research experiences, research
Mm.
philosophy, and research on research. And all these different
Ooh.
frameworks, including um, collaborative research, research ethics, but it even showed some of the, you know, sort of the domains, like, and it's very interesting.
I'm
System,
thinking, I'm like, I kind of want to write an article to submit about like my shift from positivist to trans paradigmatic.
that this would be fantastic for this journal looks
Yeah.
like it would be a really good one. Ooh, we could all, this would be a really good one for us. So you can check this out. But what I got excited also about with this book, um, first of all, we've already been hearing about participatory research and feminist
Yeah.
participatory research and, phenomenological, you know, these, like you mentioned, these kind of constructivist approaches and interpretive, and there's only so many that they can cover. And this book's 1998, right? So it's a little bit
Hmm.
older. Their other one is a little bit newer. But they go into a lot of areas. So I thought it also could be interesting to look at the tables. There are 6 tables in this first
Oh
chapter.
yeah. Those were really, I love how they broke
Yeah,
everything down like
yeah.
that.
Comparison of the modern Western mindset. So what they're really trying to draw our attention to is like these are sort of the 6 sort of little islands here, or you know, it really tells in a nutshell what the whole chapter covers.
Hmm.
Comparison of the modern Western mindset with its logical alternatives. Next, table 2 is characteristics of orthodox science, and then the proposed complementary science. So they're describing this as a complementary science. And then third is contrasting positivist and naturalist axioms. So
Yeah.
calling this naturalist, some of the terms. And then characteristics of separateness science
Hmm.
and
And bonus science.
wholeness
Where
science.
was
Isn't that
that?
interesting?
Yeah.
Interesting. They're calling this like so in a way, that whole reductionist, they're differentiating. I mean, they're still a little binary, but they're inviting people to move to this more kind of holistic or wholeness science.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
and I think the way they did that though, like the presenting it as kind of like a binary is helpful to kind of compare and contrast. And they're also addressing like directly that it's not necessarily a binary, like it's a lot more fluid
yeah.
than that. But again, like the way our brains are structured, having that kind of like, okay, these are kind of the different,
Oh,
methodologies and everything.
yeah. So I think they are aiming to try to stay away from binaries. They're
Mhm.
calling it kind of more like expanded. So
Exactly.
section 4, or the fourth section in there, assumptions and practices of an expanded approach to science research and discipline
Mhm.
theory. I think that's going to be a really important section, and that's the one that has the some tables from a symposium that was held.
Yeah, that's the one that I found the most helpful because they kind of go through again, it's like the assumptions of like conventional research and um like the framework that school of
Mm,
thought comes from. And then they give their like, these are the new assumptions under like this
yeah,
wholeness science or more naturalistic methods come in. And so you really can kind of see the different ways where expansion is possible, yet the scholarly integrity is still very, very present.
absolutely.
you know which honestly, and I think a lot of that, what is standing out for me and just what kind of has been this whole semester and even last semester, is just it's total, like it's awareness and transparency that really is the piece that's making a difference. Like there's not like a rigidity to like this is the right way of thinking, this is the way we have to do this. Nothing can change. Like it's fluid. And like if I had to sum it up in one thing, it would be that it's fluid and transparent.
Beautiful. It is. It's fluid. It's transparent. It's
Mhm.
very respectful for intellectual thinking, because
Yeah.
it's not trying to say this is the way it should be, and vie, on the houses of those who are a pox on the houses of those who are
Yeah.
doing anything other than this. They're not really, advanced or evolved. But it does talk. I think it is using a language that to me does speak of transformation,
Hmm.
and of evolution in a way,
Yeah. Because I think,
and
go ahead.
continued.
Sorry.
Like there's new. I'm sure that the people who wrote this stuff have even expanded even more, because that was
Oh, yeah.
20, whatever, 20 something years ago, 22 years ago, something like this.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that I really appreciate too is like Brad and, or I don't know if it's Broad or Brad and Anderson mentioned this. And I think like Chalisa and
Hmm.
Lincoln and Lynn and Guba did too. Just this idea that like we're not demonizing positive is paradigms. We're pointing out things that are limiting and might be, in a little bit of conflict with some of these other paradigms. It's
Yeah.
not like we're going to demonize this. We want to push it away, that it doesn't have value. And I think I talked about this. I think you weren't on the Zoom call with the Saturday Zoom call for this class,
No. Mm-mm.
but we talked a little bit about, it's kind of like, I struggle with this idea of like, so the reductionist stuff and this whole like positivist quantitative like traditional academia makes sense evolutionarily, and at the same time a lot of it is rooted in oppressive systems.
Mm.
And so I'm kind of struggling a little bit with like, yeah, like we're putting it in this language so it makes sense from the way our brains work, the way we break things down. And then part of me is also like, I feel like I am like adapting to the oppressor. Um, and I'm also like thinking, again, trauma therapist is always like in the back of my brain.
Oh, I understand this. And I also work with mostly men and, mostly psychiatrists and clinical psychologists who, um, are kind of a club a little bit of
Mhm.
this is how research should be. And if it's outside those boundaries, then it's less
Mhm.
valid and
Mhm.
less, taken less seriously.
That's
So
where I come from.
you recognize that. And so I don't
Yeah.
know if you read what I wrote for, in that Nature of Paradigms, kind of what you were talking
Yeah.
about. Like, we don't want to throw, I said we don't want to throw babies out with the bathwater here. But
Yeah.
I like how you're framing that. I didn't even touch on that we're kind of colluding on some level, or we're allowed, if we think that that's the top of the pyramid and we should really be aiming for that. And there really is a pyramid
Mhm.
that is used, as in terms of the rigor and you know, that's desired in research. Um, so something that I wrote here, let's see. Okay. As I work to free my captive mind, I'm reminding myself not to be misled by artificial binaries. I feel privileged to be a recipient and beneficiary of the knowledge and perspectives of all the thinkers, Aristotle and Descartes, the positivist and post-positive theorists among them. As I learn to do integrative, transdisciplinary, and transformative studies, I want to take the best and leave the rest. And I surmise that there will be new innovations from those of us trained in these methods.
Yeah.
Um, what did I say? Something earlier about understanding. Oh, yeah, yeah. Beginning with positivist and post-positive paradigms, I think their reification is quite understandable based on the existing knowledge base, scientific stance, and observations of their shapers, and the embrace of the methods arising from these. We live in a world that is so chaotic, where there's so much outside of our grasp. So having means and methods to capture certainty is a universal human desire. And I think, this idea of like, I think there's an anxiety when things start going outside the bounds of what can be
Oh yeah.
proven and replicable. And, um, you know, every people want to be on the side of, um, you know, right and valid, so I said how gratifying it must have felt to have discovered methods, these methods for people who were in search of certainty in whatever ways they could find it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. And as you were talking, I just had like, I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to verbalize it, but I just had like this meld of like 15 different things come into my brain. So I'm gonna try to verbalize it. So as you were talking, and one of the things I was kind of trying to make the point of before is what I'm seeing with like this research paradigm of like the positivists and kind of having this uh, like speaking the language of the oppressor, from like a trauma standpoint and like a survival standpoint, like, yeah, we do that. And it's very purposeful. And that's why we're surviving. And that's why we're creating new things, because we found these ways to adapt and start to shift these changes. And so, and I think when we think of transformation, it's like this big, like, aha, like, oh my gosh, everything changes at once. And sometimes it can seem like that, but the paradigm shift, which is again what it's, I'm sure you know, is what it's called in like cognitive psychology too, that paradigm shift happens over time. And sometimes it's not noticeable, but all these kind of little things and these little ideas and these little shifts and these conversations and people being trained and things being published all culminates to then, oh my gosh, there's this huge shift in the discipline or in
yes.
research or in the social realm. And I see the aspects of creativity there too, where like the same thing can happen with creativity. You know, you look at somebody who maybe they just created this thing and it seems like it came out of nowhere. And so in my creativity class, we're actually talking about this neuroscientist Bo Lotto, and he talks a lot about perception and creativity and how a lot of times these big creative things can seem like something huge to somebody else, but from that person who's creating that, from their perspective, it's just the next logical step. You're just kind of following these little things, these little intuitions, these things that make sense
Yeah.
to them. So I think when we're bringing in the positionality with research and being transparent, that is the key right there. And so we might have to have a little bit of the oppressive language or the like appealing to the oppressor to some point, and then it's going to get to the point where we're like, no, bye. You know, we created this and we made this foundation that now we can go over here and this is shifting. This is
Well, I
different.
mean, the fact that there's even, you know, as part of the APA, there's so many divisions in the APA now, like the division of positive psychology. For a while, um, Marty Seligman and some other folks were just like,
Yeah.
they were very involved in these other, if they talked about it, I'm sure some people went, oh yeah, that cute little thing you're talking about there.
Mm-hmm.
But then at some point there was enough, you know, it took a while, but then he's like, no, we need a new division. This is not just like a bunch of us who are, having coffee talking about this stuff. And that's
Yeah.
why there's so many journals, and that's why there's so many,
Mm-hmm.
that's why coaching exists. Coaching exists because at some point there was needing to be that it was a very interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary development from self-actualization and um, corporate and that whole world of leadership coaching. That
Mm-hmm.
people were finding that though there are ways to continue to reach higher and to learn that are highly collaborative, that are non-clinical, that are non-pathologizing, and something new was called for. It was originally the first people who were doing that. A bunch of them were coming from the leadership world, and a bunch of them were coming from the counseling world, and
It
it
really is Buddhism when you go down to it.
very much. And
Like,
Socratic, even some of the Socratic method, just asking, inquiry, just asking people questions.
mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah. And I think the thing that I'm interested in too, that has come up a lot, is like this idea of neuroplasticity too, where like all this is changing the brain. Um, and we have the ability to continue to do that even going forward. Like there are people that technically were born blind and they've been able to rewire their brains to see. It might not be in the conventional way that you and I see, but they're able to see and detect things around them. There's humans who have developed echolocation,
mm-hmm.
and that's with concentrated effort and change and the way that their brains work. So really like the possibilities are kind of limitless, especially like 30 years ago, they were like, your brain cells are dead. And like, once you lose them, you lose them. Like, no, you can't do this.
Right, you're
Meanwhile,
cooked by
people,
age 30, most people, or at least,
yeah,
we used to think it was much younger, and now we know.
we have so much
No,
more capacity than that. And then that's that whole other, then we're bringing in the medical science, right? Where then that's when I start to get frustrated because I'm like, all of this stuff, like the brain and the neuroplasticity and consciousness is so cool. And we're looking at it from the medical side. And then you also have the spiritual side. So they're like opposites of the spectrum if you get people like on the extremes,
seeming
right?
opposites.
And I'm like,
Well,
but like it's all the same.
it's
It's
all,
all
it's like
one.
more like they're all connected. It's an arc.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think that's where again we have to have the collaboration, not even necessarily with disciplines, but literally with humans and connection and being able to communicate with each other in a way that we can be heard. And I think that's the main piece, that like empathy. I think that's the big connector for all of this, honestly, is empathy. If I had to sum it up, it would be empathy.
Amen. You mentioned Buddhism, so that's a path of mine woven into my life more and more, and wisdom and compassion. And I think that this is that we're engaged in a way of scholarship, a path of scholarship that is very much about knowledge sharing and sharing of wisdom, as well as for the good of all, for the higher good, for this inquiry-based, problem-oriented, transdisciplinary approach here, and then having research methods that really put foundations under some of those aspirations. And I think the more skillful that we are in applying, first of all, learning about these transformative or transpersonal methods, I think we can put that empathy and that intention into,
Mhm.
some into the hands of people like ourselves, actually, who can turn it into praxis and create ways, sort of skillful means.
Yeah, that's what I look at this the idea of like improvisation, which was like kind of my first thing coming in here.
Mhm.
Improvisation, and improvisation is complexity, and the idea of like a flow state where the way we get there is we have to have some kind of technical background or skill set to kind of go off of to then be able to improvise and continue and expand on something. I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's pretty difficult to expand on something that doesn't exist or we don't know exists, or
Yeah.
you know so it's kind of the same thing. It's like we have all of this background, and then it's like, okay, now we're going to take it forward and kind of see what it could be transformed or shifted to, and what could that look like. What are the possibilities within this, and what are the things that aren't even thought of as possibilities that just kind of emerge from the awarenesses and collaboration, you know
So it's in a form of applied improv, like a
yes.
scholarly, I don't know, whatever you want,
Scholarly applied improv.
improvisational paradigm of,
Yes.
for,
Yes,
I don't
maybe
know
I'll
if
write
that
an article
exists.
about that.
I shared that with you. So I've done
Yeah.
improv and musical improv also. And
Me too.
you have?
Yeah, I was on a house team, a musical improv house team. It was
Oh my
terrifying
gosh.
because
Oh my,
I really don't like singing in front of people, even though I've been in musicals and stuff. But that was a way to talk about. Again, my interest in studying improv as a way to explore vulnerability in a way that's a little bit safer than maybe other activities. Maybe not for everybody, but for some people.
so Erin, I've been recording this. Are you
Okay.
comfortable if we share this as
Oh
part of
yeah.
our conversation? I can post it, even though
Mhm.
so hi everybody. So we're covering lots of ground here, but I think this is a great conversation and we can type up some of this if we want. But I think this is a lovely, jumpstart into diving into this material. And
Yeah, this is awesome.
so, yeah, this is really awesome. So I'm going to do, as I'm reading more, we'll share some of those, I'll write up or record some of my reflections, and then we can continue on Wednesday.
Okay. Yeah. What
Hold
time
on
works
one
for you?
second.
I have a client at 11.
Hold on a second. I'm just going to stop the recording.
Okay.